Greetings, mortals. It is I, Remortis, coming at you with a guide for Vrising. And today, we will be going over how to get ahead in this game. When a server freshly wipes, it is an arms race to see who can get to the top and claim some of these beautiful shards. So you can keep rushing from boss to boss to boss. However, eventually this will catch up to you because you'll be trying to get all these new resources and then you realize, oh, wait a minute, I still needed some stuff from the previous zones. Well, today's tips, we're going to go over how to maintain that momentum of being on top by slowing down, oddly enough. What do I mean by that? Well, let's just get right into it, shall we? In order to maintain your progression, you need to have an ample amount of supplies. And I don't know about you, but I'm not trying to run my ass all the way down to the bottom of the map to get some stuff from the older zones, such as the sulfur, copper, iron, etc. So in other words, we need to do our chores. Starting off, I highly encourage you to make a garden. It's really simple to do, and it'll just constantly give you resources for free with very minimal effort. The only hard part is really just finding the seeds. You can either find the seeds from just hitting the plants in the wild, or purchasing them from merchants, or finding them in chests. And once you have the seeds, you just simply go to your build menu, go to production, go to growing plots, and you'll automatically start off with the exterior growing plots as you just do some of the first initial quests. You got the small plots, medium growing plots, and the large growing plots. These are pretty nice. I personally prefer these over the other plots you can get, such as these the small, medium, and large growing plots. These are all kind of nice too if you like things to be a little more organized. But I prefer to have things in like in rows of 3 because I like to use the slashers and just use our queue to just quickly harvest everything like that. Anyways, once you have your seeds available, go ahead and just put your plots down and then put the seeds on your first row of your hotbar so you can access them, and then you just simply start placing them as you see fit. Now, some of the seeds that are most vital that you want to get are cotton seeds. Once you get to Act 2, eventually you're going to need to get cotton, and to do that you have to go on these different little cotton farms that have garlic. And the garlic debuff is awful. It decreases the damage you deal while increasing the damage you take. And it also increases your aggro radius to nearby enemies, for NPCs anyways. And especially if you're on a PvP server, you do not want to be walking around with this buff, as people will be able to kill you faster while you can barely do any damage to them. So after you make your first full quote-unquote harvest of cotton from the various locations out in the Dunley farms, if you manage to get some seeds from those cottons, definitely plant that immediately. One thing to note when you do plant your seeds, each of these cotton plants do not yield nearly as much as they do out in the wild, but that's okay because once you have enough plants here, and they'll just naturally grow every few days, and you just harvest them whenever you come back to base. And you'll just have a nice supply of cotton for free. And then of course there's other really good plants for you to gather, all with different purposes. Some of them are for tailoring such as that. Other good ones to watch out for are the grape seeds that you can get in Silverlight and other merchants. Ghost shrooms, those are really good to grab as well because those are really annoying to farm. You're also going to want to have a nice supply of blood roses so you can keep making your own potions. And then snowflowers, fire blossoms, sunflowers, those are all pretty good as well, so you don't need that much of a supply. So one thing to note is even if you're not actually going to be utilizing these plants for a certain potion, if you have a big stockpile of them, just throw them in your grinder. That will create pollen. And what do we want pollen for? Well, if you combine plant fiber with pollen, you'll be able to generate coarse thread. And coarse thread is very important as it'll allow you to make wool and also be able to make scrolls with your paper, which is used for your research. And by using the paper press, you can make paper through sawdust and plant fiber. And then if you add coarse thread to that, you'll be able to make scrolls. And then once you get tech parts, you can use those scrolls to make schematics. And this will help you fill out your study, your research desk, and eventually your Athenium. And that's really important to get, since in order to advance to the next tier, you need to have the merciless version of whatever the weapon tier you're using. And that brings me to my next point on why you should also develop your garden, so you can help supply your tombs and your vermin nests. So tombs are nice because they can help you generate skeletons or other undead monsters to get those resources, such as grave dust or scourgestone, and eventually spectral dust. All of those are very useful resources that you're going to be using throughout the game. And the second aspect of the tomb is that it can also be used as a small line of defense if somebody were to raid your base. As you can see here, all these people are just going to start attacking me, and that could be just a slight nuisance and annoyance to would-be raiders. So should they break down your walls, they'll have to fight all those undead. Granted, all those skeletons and little zombies there were kind of poo-poo, but you can make a banshee as well as a skeleton priest to, do a little bit more damage to your enemies. And as I mentioned, setting up your vermin nest early is very useful as well. All these are just a bunch of giant rats, which will provide us rugged hide and also seeds for our garden. Granted, they're low tier seeds, but hey, at least it's something to help you get started. Typically, it'll be blood rose or hell's clarion, or sometimes even fire blossoms. The other thing you should also do, if you don't feel like having to deal with those big rats, is by making your tiny rats. As having a nice supply of rats is very important for you as well, to keep a nice supply of vermin salves. And vermin salves is a recipe that you always have on you after you do the first initial quests. And it just uses rats, plant fiber, and bones, and will make a potion. And I always try to keep at least 5 to 10 of these on me at most times. And the vermin nest will help you gather those rats to supply your vermin salve. Never be without these, because these are, just like I said, they're free potions, and they can heal you while you are on the move. Even when you're riding a horse, or even could be a nice little pick me up while in combat. Granted, it is a heal over time, and if you take any damage while you are being healed by this, it will stop the effect. So that's just something to keep in mind, but it's also a nice way to help heal you in between fights. And all of this is made possible thanks to having our garden started. All right, so not only should you develop your garden, you should also develop your servants. So as you progress your little quests up in the top left, you'll eventually get an ability called Dominate Human. So all you got to do is just fight a human target and get them to the point where you can feed on them, and then you cast your Dominate Person spell. You do that, you'll capture them, they'll follow you, they'll have a little bit of health. So then you got to bring them to your castle and either put them in a servant coffin, or you can put them in a prison cell. And we'll go over that in a moment. We'll bring our guy over here. And here's Evan, my trusty brother. So one of the reasons you want to have servants is they are literally a line of defense for your castle should you be invaded, and they will defend you even if you're not online or if you're away from your castle. So keeping them geared up is really important, and we'll get touch of that in a moment. But not only can they defend your castle, you can also send them on missions with your throne room, and more importantly, you can send them on missions that are going to places to get resources that you really don't want to do. All right, and look at that. My inventory is full now thanks to our servants. And all right, so here is the throne room map that you can send your servants onto each area. And as you can see by the highlighted areas, each of these spots are locations that you can send your minions. Another thing to note is that each of these areas are divided by what region they are. And if you have a corresponding servant, you'll be able to get more rewards from that location. And then following that, there is a type associated with each area, such as humble appearance, tenacious strength, military tactics, and trekking expertise. And each of these are associated by their blood types. Rogue will give you tracking expertise, Brute will give you tenacious strength, humble appearance will be generated from workers. Oh, and sacred resistance is from scholars. So the reason you want to have the associated type is that it reduces the difficulty from each mission. And the difficulty is based on their gear score. So for example, the Haunted Mine, which is going to be one of the main places you're going to be sending your minions a lot, because you need a lot of iron in this game, And if you're on a PvP server, I don't know about you, but I'm not trying to get caught with my pockets full of ore and just get ganked and lose it all. So you can safely send your minions out there and they'll be able to get a lot of it for you. And then if you see here, looking at the difficulty, it's at 540. So if we sent Bort here, even though he's from the Dunley farmlands, he'll get more resources from it. You only have a 64% chance to succeed. You can increase this by moving your slider here to see the durations. As you can see, there's 2 hours, 4, 8, 16, and 23. 23 hours is a long time to wait for stuff, but say maybe you're not getting on that day. You might just send it on there and then they'll be able to get all those resources for you. Otherwise, to be optimal, you're going to want to send your minions on the 2-hour missions, so that way you can keep sending them and sending them. Because you can see here, 4 hours will yield about 600 to 700 ore, whereas 2 hours is about 400 to 500. And obviously, if you did 2-hour missions, you'll be able to get more resources than the 4. So that's just something to consider. So say you know you have to go to work, or maybe you have to go to sleep, or maybe you have to go out to do some errands, then you might want to consider sending them to these other durations. Or perhaps you just really want to make sure that they succeed. You can also do that too. It's also depending on how quickly you need those resources. But in order to really thrive, you want to try to send your minions on as many 2-hour missions as possible. And to do that, you need to make sure you meet the gear score. And as mentioned, Bort here is only 478, and he can't do this 540 mission by himself. But luckily, this mission also has 2 slots to help you gather more things. And simply by adding a Brute here, which gives you tenacious strength, that's what the mine needs. All of a sudden, look at that. Now Bort is at 100% because the difficulty is lowered to 440. And we'll go ahead and send these folks here, and they'll go and get my ore from me. Pretty sweet. Moving on to our next point is gearing up your servants. So A, they can be more efficient for you when they're out doing those missions to get you more resources. And keep in mind that based on the difficulties, you don't need to have them fully geared. Just give them either your leftover gear from before. One thing to note too is if things are broken or low durability, your minion will still get the full effect as if it was repaired. So if you don't want to repair your stuff, just give it to your minions and they'll make good use out of it. Same thing with your old gear. Go ahead and toss that on some of your minions as well, especially considering you don't need to have everybody at the highest gear level. That said, there is a benefit to having your minions in the best gear possible, in that better gear means stronger servants, which means better defenders against would-be raiders. So that is just another way to help you get ahead. If your servants are decently enough geared, they can keep going out on missions to keep getting you resources, especially for stuff that you really don't want to farm, such as iron, sulfur, tech parts, mutant grease, fish, gems, or whatever you might desire that you don't want to go get yourself. Or perhaps you just want more of it and you want to be able to safely get it. Especially on some PvP servers, it is a little difficult to acquire various ores because all the mines are hotspots. That being said, there are other locations for you to get your resources, which will just throw a little tidbit in here. For the copper, obviously the bandit copper mine is a really good source of copper itself, but it's also a death trap, as many people would be coming here, especially when a server first opens, to kill the boss there and also try to get copper. So luckily they did add a rear entrance back here. I'm not sure if you can see it here. Yeah, there's a rear entrance. If you go up here by the boss, make your way over here, you can just jump out. So just be wary that people might be here trying to gank you, waiting for you, or they might just come in through the front entrance if you were to leave. This copper mine is a battlefield in the early stages of a wipe. Luckily, they added 2 other copper mines for you to get your copper should you need it, and not have to worry about people ganking you. There is a copper mine to the east over here at this bandit copper camp, which is just south of the bandit trapper camp, or where the frost archer Keeley is. So that copper camp is right here. There's another copper camp right over here, just to the east of the sulfur quarry. So those are 2 other locations for you to get your copper needs. Moving on to Dunley Farms, there are actually 2 sources of iron mines. There's obviously the haunted iron mine, where all the undead and the militia are fighting each other. It can get really hectic in there, and granted, is a ton of iron there to be had. One full sweep of there should last you a good amount of time. But there is another iron mine over here at this iron cave. You need to have bear form or explosives to get in, as there are going to be giant rocks on either side. But be wary as you're in here, as they're giant rock elementals that will attack you if you hit a node near them, and they're annoying to fight. Ideally, for this iron mine, you want to be in the 50s or so that we actually can take on the golems there. From what I understand, though, I never actually did it myself because it takes forever. But if you just stay in bear form the whole time, even if you're harvesting the iron, the golems won't bother you unless you hit them. So just be wary of that. But that's just some food for thought for you to get some alternate sources of your ore. Moving on towards silver, this is the only source for silver, so that's going to be anyways. So now you get the idea that some of these places are pretty crazy, especially on PvP servers. So having servants to go into these locations for you just saves you some headache. As for what kind of minions you're going to want, let's go ahead and look at our throne room to see the types of servants we are going to want to find. For the Farbane Woods, we're going to, depending on the things you're going to want, personally, I think copper, sulfur, and the fishing to be some of the best things for them to send off to, and the fact that they don't really need the best gear. Especially sulfur, since you're going to need a ton of that, as well as fish. And we'll be moving on to why in a moment why fish is so important. But anyways, back to the topic. If you want to get a Farbane Woods character, pretty much all you're going to want is a brute from the Farbane Woods and a civilian, so you can get the humble appearance. Granted, the difficulties in the Farbane Woods isn't that important, so pretty much any gear you give them will be just about good enough to do the quests there. So that's probably not as necessary. Moving on to the Dunley Farms, this is where you probably want to have specific types of servants to efficiently gather things for you. Sending things to the cotton farms is a very good idea. You're going to want to have a scholar from the Dunlin Farms. Either you're going to get the nun, which is like a combat unit, or you'll get the little villager nuns as well. Usually they travel in packs of 6 and they're walking around, or you'll see them at the little shrines. Anyways, as you can see here, sending a scholar to the cotton farm will yield you 400 to 500 cotton in only 2 hours. That's a lot of cotton. That's a really good deal. So you're going to definitely want to have a scholar from the Dunlin Farms, because the Dunlin Farms will give you 20% more things. And then, as mentioned before, for the Haunted Iron Mines, you're going to want to have a brute, as they'll have tenacious strength, and they'll be able to get that iron a little bit easier for you, so you don't have to have them as geared as possible. And then there's a few other locations that are pretty good, but the main things you want to have from the Dunley Farms is the Cotton Farms and the Iron Mine. And to some extent, the Mosswick Village, if you have a villager here. Well, it really doesn't really have to be a villager, but as long as you have something from Dunley Farms, the reason you want to send them to Mosswick Village is for oil, scrolls, and fish. Fish is very important. Again, we'll get to that in a moment. Moving on to the Gloom Rot, this is where you're going to send a lot of your minions as well, because farming for tech scrap and mutant grease is a bit annoying. As for what types of minions you're going to want to have, you're going to want to have a warrior, a brute, a villager, a scholar, and to some extent a rogue. All of these are really good locations for you to get stuff, especially for the brutes. There are those guys with the shields, and those would probably be a good candidate for somebody to go to this mine. And getting all this sulfur and copper is very important, more so with the sulfur. So really, if you're trying to limit how many servants you're going to have, you're probably going to have a solid brute, a worker, a rogue, and a scholar. The warrior one isn't that necessary, because getting mutant grease isn't that terrible. You just go around and just literally fight any mutant out there, and it's not so bad. Moving on to the Cursed Forest, you're going to want to have a warrior to kill the spiders a little bit easier. As you can see here, we get about 40 silkworms in 2 hours. It's not terrible, not amazing either. I don't really recommend sending your servants to this location, just because it's really easy to get pristine hide. Kill one of those or two of those werewolves, and you'll easily get 200 to 300 pristine hides in seconds versus waiting 2 hours. However, I would send them to this location, to just the Cursed Forest in general, as you can see this southern one here, because it gives you ghost shrooms, and those are really annoying to find. So really, that alone is why you'd want to send a hunter there. Otherwise, you could send a worker to the Cursed Village to help you get some ghost crystals, but again, this is also a pretty easy resource to gather yourself. So really, the only thing you absolutely want to have is a rogue, at least, to help you go to the Cursed Forest, to help you find shrooms, or perhaps a warrior to help you get some silkworms. But really, getting silkworms is pretty easy as well, as long as you can make it to the spider cave, not hindered by people or other people taking the spiders. Moving on to Silverlight, there are plenty of really good locations that you're going to want to have stuff being sent to. So, to no surprise, you're going to want to have a really good brute to help you get silver ore. And look at that, 400 silver in only 2 hours. And if you have a nice brute, you can help lower that difficulty. So that's something to consider. Especially because, depending on your server, you can't teleport your silver. And this road running back to wherever your base might be is pretty annoying with all the mobs there. But not to mention, you need to invest in silver resistance so you can carry all that silver and make it to wherever you're heading. And then, of course, if you were to be ganked by other people while you're carrying that silver, well, you just wasted all your time there. So being able to send your minions to go get that silver directly is very useful. So for the Silverlight, really all you're going to want is a brute, and a worker is going to be your best bet. You can send a rogue out here to get gem dust and gemstones and such, but it's really not that hard to get. Beyond going to the bosses, I never go to these Heartbreed locations, even in person. I do, however, farm around Brighthaven a lot, and it can be very stressful over there as there are a ton of mobs, so you'll be fighting tons and tons of reinforcements and other enemies there, but not to mention it's a hot spot for players as well. So to be able to send your minions out here to get jewelry or coins or schematics is very useful too. But the main things I think that are worthwhile getting out of here is the silver for sure, and the grapes, at least until you can grow them yourself if you get enough grape seeds. Okay, I know that was a lot to take in, but developing your servants is very vital for your overall success, especially in the later part of the game. Mostly because it'll save you time from going down and collecting those things, and more importantly, it is a lot safer to gather those things, especially something to consider on a PvP server. So moving on to my last tip on getting ahead is fishing. Why do we want to fish? Well, once you have a prisoner with a good enough blood quality here, like as you see I have a 100% worker, you can keep tapping their blood by using a blood potion, or a little bit better just using the blood merlot, which you need the grapes for. I do have some grapes, but I'm too lazy to go grab them because they're in another room. But as you can see here, we can tap the blood here of our prisoner. It'll deal a little bit of damage and increase his misery. Look at that, almost half health. And the next time we tap him, he'll take 28% more damage. So in order to help heal him and lower his misery, you're going to want to feed them some fish. Different fish provide different levels of healing and lowering their misery. So making sure you're feeding fish in between your blood taps will allow you to A, get more blood, and B, keep your prisoner a lot longer. Unfortunately, I accidentally killed my 100% brute because I was gambling and I lost some. So now I have a 96 brute. But anyhow, as you can see, the fish is almost done healing him. Look at that. Lowered his misery by a bit and healed him a decent amount. We'll give him another fish just to be safe. And if you don't really feel like fishing, send your servants out to those little fishing areas. The Mosswick Village in Dunley Farms, the fishing spot in the Farbane Woods, and then there's also one of the spots in Brighthaven, I believe it's at the docks, will also generate you fish. So that might make you want to incentivize building a castle that has its own personal pond or water source, such as this base down here in the bottom right of Silverlight. There's a little lake here that has a few nodes, and as well as a tiny little river. And all you have to do is equip your fishing pole and cast a line towards the fishing area and just wait for you to see the big splashes. And then simply tap left click once, and look at that, you got a fish. All right, and that's going to wrap up today's video. I hope these tips help you to get ahead on your server. Perhaps you might even surpass the person who's slightly ahead of you because they didn't develop their garden and servants, so they don't have those goods just continually coming in. Meanwhile, you took the time, and now you are well supplied going into the later acts. And thank you so much for watching. Please like, comment, subscribe for more guides like these. And I'll see you in the next video. Farewell for now.